Here we are after having finished all of our stockinette and textured stripes. We are ready to go ahead and do the garter edging, which will be along the bottom V part of our wrap. And the reason we put this garter edging on is because this will prevent the bottom of the wrap from curling. It's the same reason we did a garter edge along the sides of each of our rows, which is actually the top part of the wrap. So this is all just helping, since the majority of this wrap is worked in stockinette. We need to have that garter stitch there. You could also do probably a rib stitch or a seed stitch to prevent any curling along the edges of our wrap. So as you can see here, I've already done several of the garter stitch rows. I wanted to show you the wrong side of the garter stitch rows because the right side is worked exactly the way it is with our stockinette sections. You're just going to be knitting across, doing your increases, and that's it. But when we work our garter stitches, our garter rows on the back side of the work, it's a little bit different. So I wanted to go ahead and show that to you. Flip my work around here. Okay. So it starts as normal, where we knit our first 3 stitches up to that stitch marker and slip the marker. Now, instead of going ahead and purling across this row the way we did with our stockinette stripe, we are going to keep the yarn in back and just continue knitting across this row, which will keep this in garter stitch. And then when we get to our center stitch, we're going to purl that, the center spine stitch. So I will meet you there and show you how I do that. Okay, I'm just 1 stitch away from my center spine stitch, so I'm gonna go ahead, knit this last one, slip my marker, bring my yarn forward. Always wanna keep that center spine stitch in stockinette, even though we are working garter stitch rows. So I'll go ahead and purl that, slip my next marker, move the yarn back, and continue in knit. We are going to finish off this whole row with nothing but knit stitches, and then when I turn my work, I'm actually going to be at the point where I'm ready for my bind off, so we can go over how to do that together as well. Okay, let's talk about binding off. When you have a project like this, a top-down triangle scarf or a sock or anything where the bound off edge is going to be draping or stretching, you want to make sure that the kind of bind off you use will allow that edge to stretch nicely and it won't pucker. For me, I've tested several different bind off techniques for triangle scarves, and I actually find that simply binding off loosely is what works best for me. If you find that you're an extremely tight knitter and you need to do something like Jenny's very stretchy bind off, extremely stretchy bind off, or another technique like that, please go right ahead. But I am going to show you my tips for working a regular bind off on the stretchy side, kind of loosely. So let's get started. If you're like me and you're able to knit loosely, you can just go ahead and start binding off loosely with the same needles that you've been using for your whole project. If you find that you're a tight knitter and you need a little extra help knitting loosely, you can simply, if you're using interchangeable needles like me, pop this needle off and put on one that's 1 or 2 sizes bigger. If you don't have interchangeable needles, you can easily use another set of circulars, a straight needle, or even a double pointed needle that's in the right size for you, because we're never going to be having more than two stitches at a time on our right needle since we're just binding off. But for me, I just like to bind off nice and loosely, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Again, this is just your typical regular bind off. So you knit the first stitch and you knit the second stitch. Again, I'm doing this nice and loose, and you simply pass that first stitch over the second, and that is 1 stitch bound off. And you're just going to do that down the entire line of stitches. Don't forget to remove your stitch markers as you come to them. So we will just go down the whole line here of stitches, binding off our whole project. Again, don't forget to finish off all of your garter rows. I was on the final garter stitch row before I demonstrated this, so if you didn't finish those off, please go back and do that first. We want to have several garter rows along our edging here to ensure that the edge of the wrap does not curl, since stockinette stitch curls. And once we're finished binding off our whole line of stitches here in this row, I will move on to the next video. You can go ahead and check out our finishing tutorial, where I go over how I like to weave in my ends on both the knit and the crochet wrap, how to make the tassels, and how I like to block my work, especially when I'm working with 100% acrylic yarn like Color Theory. I hope you've enjoyed this project so far. Again, don't forget to tag me in your whip photos or your finished object photos. I absolutely love seeing your projects and seeing the colors that you've chosen and the way you like to style your wraps.